T. Rowe Price, the fourth largest asset management firm in the country, and specifically dealt with small business owners and their retirement plans. And on a day-to-day basis, I was dealing with people with large asset pools, and they had their own businesses. And these conversations I had with them really kind of triggered my desire to want to have my own business. And so when I first started looking at different business models to get into, I wanted to do a business where the manager runs the shop, but it's not a skilled manager position. And what I mean by that is when you own like a pizzeria, for example, if your head pizza maker gets sick and they go down, then you got to close the store or you got to go in yourself. I wanted to get into a business that I thought that if the manager was sick or if it was their day off, you just pull someone from the ranks and there's continuity in the store and it doesn't have to pull you away from what it is you're doing. Because at the time I was pretty invested in my career in finance. I had a Series 7, 63 and 66. And so I was pretty all in on my career in finance. What I underestimated was the impact of business ownership when it came time to actually run the business. So I came across this Quick Lube in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The couple that owned it were kind of on their way out. There is a mass exit from baby boomer businesses, baby boomers that are starting to retire. There's a lot of wealth out there that is about to transition. And so a lot of these businesses are kind of just either being left behind or they're just shutting down. I think we're seeing it on a daily basis. The pandemic certainly accelerated that. But for me, I took it as an opportunity to grow my business and fill a gap in the industry that I thought was a pretty obvious void in the consumer want. So our core belief is that the consumer wants a no-frills oil change. And with that as our core belief, that led us down the path of trying to figure out how do we execute on that without having to deviate from it and having to sell other services. And for us, it really began with the building itself. The building, if you look at some of our competitors out there, these are, $1, $2, $3 million build outs. And when you get a mortgage, a commercial mortgage that is anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a month, that's a large hill to climb every month on just oil changes. So then you see having to do all these other higher ticket items that might not be higher margin items, they're higher ticket items. So your gross revenue is higher. And, gross revenue is obviously the sexy number for a lot of people. But for me, it was always, what do I take home is more important to me. So we've seen this kind of move from the more established players in the space to doing these services that get away from their core competencies, which has led to reputational damages, and also credibility issues, and also just an overdependence on staff that is either too qualified that you're overpaying them because they have to do complicated processes, or not qualified enough, and then you're just carrying the back end liability of having people do services that they really shouldn't be doing. And so in the hierarchy of automotive, oil changes are about probably the second lowest rung, right above detailers. Tire technicians might be right above them, but for us, our labor pool allows us to select from a wider range of candidates, which allows us to keep that expense down, which for the first 10 locations that I opened, that was really the direction that I took with the business was, how do we create the most streamlined version of this business possible? And it came down to creating a training process, a flow chart, if you will, of how to do the service that requires the least amount of people. It always bewildered me when I drove by some competitors and you have 2 guys working and 3 guys standing around, what the purpose of that was. And so we've been able to create that model. And then once we got to 10 locations, I started looking from the consumer side to the operator side a little bit harder. And that's when I thought about franchising, because I did feel as though this was a model that was easy to replicate. We have far fewer SKUs than most businesses. We have far fewer moving parts. And so it allows for us to have a very repeatable model. And so what we did was we teamed up with Frandevco, which is Michael and Chris and Sung and Chuck and all the guys over there that have years and years of franchise experience. Because I'm an operator at heart. It's when I go to the stores, I jump in and do oil changes still to this day. But franchising is a whole different ballgame. And my role has evolved from being an operator to being support and making sure that the franchisees that are in our pipeline get the support they need to get the things done that need to be done. So we embarked on this journey. We were legally able to sell franchises starting in March of 2021. We sold over the course of the last 10 months, I believe, we're up to almost 30 franchisees with over 70 territories sold. And I think the model speaks to a lot of people. We've got people in the system that were prior either employees or operators of other kinds of quick lubes, and the model resonates with them because they saw the evolution of our industry. And I think that's from the consumer standpoint, it certainly resonates. So, Michael, I don't know if you can. We have a lot of people. It might be tough to curate questions, but I also don't want to just let it kind of go for a free for all. So I'll leave it to you to handle how to do the Q&A.
Yeah, no, I thanks, Costa. We do have a lot of folks on. I think let's do a round robin. That's worked the best in the past. And I'll just go from left to right. And then if you could just ask one question, and if we've got enough time at the end for any other questions, we can go back and do the round robin. So Jeremy, I see you there. Do you have a question for Costa?
And real quick, Jeremy, I'm sorry to cut you off. We do have a Discovery Day coming up next week. Everyone is more than welcome to come and attend. We do have a virtual version of it that happens at the same time as the in-person one at our headquarters. But the Discovery Day is where we really get into the weeds on vendor relationships, kind of the secret sauce, what makes us different. So I would like to try to keep these questions to as macro as possible, just so we're not getting into too nitty-gritty details on the business, but I certainly will answer, any questions about the overall model of the business.
Jeremy, do you have a question? You're on mute right now. Brandon, I don't know if you can unmute Jeremy. Okay. He's still on mute. Let's move over to Mike Allen. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Costa, thanks for taking the time. I've two quick questions, actually. The first, I know that the franchise is relatively young in its development, and so I'm curious how many units are going to be reported in the 2021 FDD?
From a franchise standpoint, our first one is opening in the next 2 weeks in Mesa, Arizona. So the 2021 FDD will have 0 franchise units. We have a corporate store that is transitioning. We tried to get it in under the gun because one of our managers actually bought into our system, and you'll get to meet him at Discovery Day if you attend. But we didn't get his paperwork in time. So the direct answer is we won't have any franchise units on the 2021 FDD, but we're anticipating of the 70 territories sold, we're anticipating 10 to 15 being open in the first quarter of 2022.
I know in the 2020 there were 4 units reporting for high-low average mean numbers in item 19. Is it still going to be those same 4 units reporting in the next FDD, or what will that number look like?
We're going to probably just expand it to all the stores. What I had done was I picked 4 stores that were freestanding buildings that were not attached to either an auto mall or had a car wash attached to it, because I wanted it to be the closest thing to the model as possible. So we actually ended up leaving off stores that were higher performing stores than those reported on the FDD, such as our Mount Prospect store, which is a suburb of Chicago, and our Youngstown store, which is attached to a car wash. But I just didn't feel as though it was an appropriate representation of the model to have those stores on there. But for this year, I think there's a combination of a change in the rules that are guiding the item 19. So I think we have to report any of the stores that have been open for either 12 or 24 months. But in any case, we have gotten a lot more interest in conversions anyway. And because of that, we're just going to put all the corporate stores on the item 19, except for those that have been open less than probably 12 months or 24 months.
Thank you. Second question, with the modular model that you have moving out now with the single bay modular units, I know that expenses are going to vary slightly based upon the ground lease, but what is your target break-even car count per day?
So Michael can share with you a industry study that has like the industry averages on car count and ticket average and things like that. We got to be really cognizant of not doing any kind of financial representations, but you know, car count is one of those things that we're still looking into, because obviously you can reverse engineer car count and ticket average and figure out financial performance based on those numbers. But you know, we have a target ground lease at $2,000 a month. We have a target building expense at $300,000 for the building at 10% markup. So you take 10%, 300,000, that's 30,000 a year rent divided by 12, that's 2,500 a month. So on those metrics, you have to be at 10 cars a day with other variable, like huge asterisk right here. There's so many other variables like local taxes and trash and utilities and things like that. But in any case, that's kind of been our number internally for a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Jeremy, are you off mute? Do you have a question for Costa?
I do. As far as earlier, as far as was said, as far as any corporate stores, would it be plans of any corporate stores coming into new locations as far as like a territory that's close by to a store? Like as far as, does Costa have plans of opening more corporate stores outside of the area that they are in?
At the moment, we aren't looking to do any corporate stores, with the exception of potentially doing some E2 visa partnerships, which either Michael or Chris can talk about. But, you know, as I mentioned, my role has largely shifted from being an operator to support. So it would be doing a disservice to our franchisees for me to have, you know, one foot in one pot and one in the other. So from the corporate standpoint, while we've had some irons in the fire, from a strategic standpoint, you know, we're not actively seeking acquisitions. We're not actively seeking new buildings, especially in the territories that we have franchisees. And if someone does approach us, for example, we have Charlotte has quite a few operators at this point. There was a gentleman in Charlotte that reached out to me to buy his chain out, it was a single independent quick lube. First thing I did was put it in front of my franchisees. The three of them all, you know, gave their input. One of them is interested in it. If he follows through with it, then, you know, it'll be his. If not, I'll have another conversation with them and ask them if they think strategically from a brand standpoint, would it be smart to operate it as a corporate store, and we'll include them and the franchisees in on that conversation.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Jim, I see you up next. You're on mute right now. Oh, there we go. You have a question?
Hey, good morning, guys. Costa, thanks for taking the call. I have two questions. One is, can you kind of give me the idea behind the justification of whether you need a 1 bay or 2 bay location?
Yeah, so the 1 bay 100% came from the idea of trying to get into real estate that quick lubes have typically not been able to get into. Of course, all other variables equal, a 2 bay is more advantageous. You have a higher ceiling for top line revenue with a 2 bay. You're going to have a better customer experience at a busy store with a 2 bay. However, if you look at our Mentor on the Lake location, which is the concept store, a 2 bay would have never been approved for that spot. And it's premier real estate. It's in a strip mall. It's right in front of the main road. It's right where all the customers are to go do their, you know, daily groceries. So for us, we want to get A+ real estate, or even, you know, B+ real estate at $2,000 a month. That's not going to happen on a half acre or a 1 acre out parcel, because then you're competing with Starbucks, you're competing with Chick-fil-A, you're competing with places that spend, $150,000 a year on the ground lease alone. And we don't want to get into that competition, because the half acre pad site and the 1 acre pad site is every single model out there. And the fun thing, well, it's not really a fun thing, but it's an interesting thing that has happened over the course of the last couple of years is I've seen a huge move to the kiosk model within a lot of the established players. I was visiting our franchisee in Houston, and Church's Chicken is popular out there. They're doing a kiosk version. Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts now have a drive-through only kiosk version. And I just read the other day that Chipotle is launching a drive-through kiosk version of their business. So it seems as though this is a kind of a popular thing right now. And I would say that probably Dutch Brothers Coffee was one of the first pioneers of it. But even they, who went to this idea of being on the outlot of parking lots, they're no longer able to do 0.25 acre lots because their lines are so long that it disrupts the flow of the parking lot. So landlords are now a little cautious to bring them into their plazas. Whereas with our model, the queuing in our store, even a busy store, the most it will ever be is probably 4 or 5 cars deep. And that's not enough to, worry a city council or a zoning board about, letting us go in. So to directly answer your question, it's 100% about the real estate. All other variables equal, we would prefer to do a 2-bay, but we think the 1-bay opens up more opportunities and kind of a path of least resistance.
Okay. And with that said, the second question is from any kind of partnerships, whether it's a Costco, Best Buy, Home Depot, or fleet type of engagements, are those things that are being worked on from a corporate level to kind of help the franchisees that are getting into their market?
So,
like I'm a Raleigh guy, so I'm looking in Raleigh right now.
Yeah, so the fleet management companies like Enterprise and Wex, they all operate on an individual store basis. So while we can put our brand out there on their website that says we are a national fleet account with Enterprise, only the participating stores do. So we don't enforce any kind of participation in those programs, but we do have a pretty robust fleet training because it is the easiest way to grow the car count. We have an inherent ramp up period in our business. There's no way around it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's not like a Chick-fil-A where the first, 5 days of the grand opening, the same people that ate there on day one ate there 4 more times that week. Every single car that comes through our doors on the grand opening, that car doesn't come back through for another 3 to 6 months. And so you don't see that oil change interval start to overlap until month 9. On the flip side of it, we have a very sticky business. And so I like to liken it to your barber. Once you find someone who cuts your hair the way you like it, you keep going back to them until they give you a reason not to. And so we have pretty aggressive campaigns on getting people inside. And I'm getting away from your question a little bit, but at the end of the day, the fleets are the easiest way to get over that hump on the ramp up period. And we have processes for having the manager source fleets that just drive by the store on a daily basis. They're going to have time on their hands in that ramp up period. They're going to be able to just, take down the names of the cargo vans and the Ford Transits that drive by and reach out to them and say, hey, I saw you drove by our shop. How many vehicles do you have? We can give you discounted oil changes on a net 30 basis. From a corporate standpoint, we don't have the national footprint to really put energy and resources into trying to do national fleet accounts because it just wouldn't make sense at this point in time. But I'm sure that when we establish ourselves in Mesa, Houston, Dallas, Kansas City, and Sacramento, all of a sudden we have a network that spans, up, down, and across. We'll probably look into some of those things.
Okay. And from a location standpoint, are you guys looking at the big box type stores, or what's the plan for Costa to get those wasted space and say those parking lots or whatever it might be?
So we've signed a LOI with Meijer, the grocery store chain in the Midwest. They have 300 plus grocery stores. We're piloting a franchise location in Holland, Michigan with one of our franchisees. If it goes well, it will open up the door to being able to go into other Meijers. And then, of course, we can use the Meijer example to pursue other chains such as Kroger or some of these other places that offer these opportunities. We also see a huge opportunity right now in the evolution of the local gas station. Right now, gas stations have had to transition their business model from being kind of a quick pop in, grab a Red Bull and bag of chips and go on your way, to more of a made to go food order destination event type experience with a 6,000-7,000 square foot building. And what that has done has created a situation where some of these neighborhood gas stations that were on 0.23 acre lots, 0.3 acre lots, are going to be coming up for sale via surplus real estate auctions. And there's going to be a huge opportunity to buy land, which is kind of the McDonald's model, and also give our franchisees the opportunity to own the land and building, which some of them are doing. And we believe strongly that one of the best ways to build wealth is through business ownership, and one of the best ways to build your business is through asset-backed, real estate-backed assets. And so we want to provide that as an opportunity as well.
Awesome, thank you.
I see. Thanks, Jim. I see France and Aicha. Do you have a question for Costa? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. I had a general question in regards to owning the land. I know, Michael, we've already had discussed that in our previous meeting, but in terms of finding location and possibly looking for land and purchasing land, the whole process, let's say we decided to independently look for land, we would have found one, would we have to go through Costa Oil for approval of the land? Is there any other research that needs to be done before you get approved, if ever we find a land on our own? Or do you work with us in finding land as well?
Yes, so I will address all of those points independently. So you bring up a great point, because the real estate portion is the most heavy lifting that is done on the franchisee side. We do offer a master broker program to assist with the search of the real estate, but ultimately the real estate is done by the franchisee, and this can be the part of the process that can hold things up, because it's largely dependent on the effort of the franchisee. For some of our earlier franchisees that struggled with the real estate process, I flew out to Frisco to meet with our Frisco franchisee because he was really struggling. And we drove around, we took down signs that said build to suit, we took down signs that said ground for lease. And we just spent literally 6 hours driving around in the area that he hoped to be in, pass the information on to our commercial broker to make the phone calls, talk about our model and what we're trying to do. And he had an LOI for a build to suit in a plaza on Main Street in Frisco within just a few weeks of us doing that. And so right now we're in lease negotiation, but I don't want to get too far away from your question, because in the buying the land part, there's a lot of variables involved, because site development is the only variable that we cannot account for. Some townships utilize sewer hookup as a revenue source. And so for something that might not be that expensive to do, the town might make it overly expensive as a way to make money. If it's a green site, which means that it doesn't have a paved, it's not a paved lot, there's more site development to be done. The town might require trees to be planted if you're getting rid of greenage. The town might require certain curbage. That's why our model has tried to minimize the amount of curbage as possible. We've tried to make it as easy as possible to deflect any kind of resistance to our model. But you also we have the real estate due diligence part of the item 7, which talks about the expense it costs to figure out if the site is viable in the first place. So if you have a site that you want to buy, you got to do some real estate due diligence on it and make sure there's not a gas pipeline that runs right through the middle of it. Because it doesn't matter if it's a perfect lot, if it has a, something that we can't build on top of, then, and that's usually done by an architect. And usually, so what we have done is we've put a process in place that walks you through the steps of the process from start to finish. And we have a national architect that has the ability to make phone calls on the behalf of the franchisees to talk to someone local to the town and say, okay, this is our proposed project. Here's a site overlay. This is what it's going to look like. And usually just through phone calls, you can get an idea of if the project will be greenlit or not. You don't want to go through the whole process and get to the zoning hearing only to get rejected when a phone call would have told you that they were not going to approve it in the first place. So we do have a nice process for that. But if you are looking for land on your own, we just ask that either you have your own architect who might be local to the area, do a site plan, or if you have a site that you want us to take a look at on your behalf, give us the address, we'll pass it on to the architect, and the architect will make phone calls and see if it's a feasible site or not.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Aisha. We've got, let's see here. Sorry, Joe Shea. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. This is Joe Gilmore from San Antonio, Texas. So y'all been hitting on a lot of my questions already with what type of model is, going to be ideal for where I'm at, so it sounds like there's a lot of variables there, Costa. I guess for the kiosk, which has got me kind of, most interested in this model since it seems to be most flexible, can you elaborate on what type of analytics that your team of resources performs to help determine the territory and ideal location, other than just being the art of the possible? Will the town approve it, et cetera? Like how do you know it's the right spot?
So we try not to, we don't want everyone to get into analysis paralysis, which has been an issue, because especially with people who are doing single units, and it's understandable, for your first one, you want it to be exactly right. But it's kind of like buying a house or watching House Hunters, and you got a $500,000 budget, but you want the $1.2 million home and wherever. And so it's tough. We have to find a nice balance between the two, because at the end of the day, our business is largely a destination business, meaning that most people wake up in the morning and they know they need to get an oil change that day. So it's on the docket for things to do. And so location isn't necessarily the end all be all. We do have a territory of 3 miles, 50,000 people. Just to give you an idea of that, in our industry, 85% of your customers come from within a 3 mile radius. The largest town that we do business in is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And that store that's a town of 47,000 people. And that store does anywhere from 40 to 55 cars a day. And that's with 2 Jiffy Lubes and a Valvoline instant oil change in Harrisburg. So we think the model kind of speaks for itself. That being said, to answer your question, we teamed up with a company called GeoStrategies. And GeoStrategies is a company that Fortune 100 companies like T-Mobile use to decide what's the optimal amount of retail locations to put in a place like the east side of Manhattan. So we invested money into utilizing GeoStrategies for the territory mapping process. But as a byproduct of it, we got access to all these resources on DMV data. We found out that Houston, Texas, per capita has the most registered vehicles in the entire country. And that's why there's the most insurance. I can't remember the statement they gave me, but basically the insurance companies live and die in Houston because of how many vehicles there are there. And I thought that was interesting. And that's also why Take 5 is probably investing as much money in the Houston market as they are. But that being said, we do have access to see car counts. We don't want to be second position. We don't want the building to be blocked, because the building itself oftentimes will be the signage. If you are in a shopping plaza, you might get a monument sign, but it's not a situation where you'll get like a pole sign like a regular retail store, unless you're in a dedicated outlot. So the building, you know, we think the colors of the building do a great job of actually drawing attention to the building itself, which is has our signage on all four sides. And but from an analytics standpoint, you know, I don't have a number of people. I don't have a minimum cars per day, vehicles per day on the road, which are kind of some of the standard metrics for quick service restaurants, things like that. But I try not to get hung up on that kind of stuff, because I know that we're going to pull our customers via savvy marketing online.
No, that helps. Thanks, Costa. And then could you just speak quickly to your either target or realized like average time to open for the different models, whether it's kiosk or an acquisition or a build out?
So barring the real estate side of it, because that variable is highly dependent on the franchisee. We have people in the system that it took them 4 weeks to get a lease. We have people in the system that have literally come on board in our San Antonio franchisee actually came on board in March and still hasn't found a site. I am happy to announce that he has several LOIs out, which is a huge step forward. He's one of the people that I would say had analysis paralysis, and he started out in the Houston market, but we moved him to San Antonio to help his search a little bit, because we think San Antonio is an up and coming market. But because these buildings are modular, they're being built at a centralized location in Grand Rapids, Michigan, actually Holland, Michigan, to be precise. We teamed up with the manufacturers of Big B Coffee, and they're dedicating some warehouse space to building our building. So we're hoping that a few months from now, we'll have a buildup of inventory that will allow us to have the buildings ready before we even bring people on board. And so the building itself is very simple, because it's going to be a kit that's loaded onto a truck. And the architect at this time is estimating that the assembly of the building is only a few weeks. The other variables are zoning hearings. Are you going to have what's called a conditional use hearing? So if we go into like retail, commercial, you know, Texas doesn't really have these issues. If it's commercial, basically you can build what you want in Texas, but in other places you have to be in a specific type of commercial for automotive use. But in that case, that could add time on. And because of the eviction moratorium ending, a lot of these places, their administrative offices double dip in terms of what they work on, and everyone's backed up right now. And then the other issue is supply chain, which I know everybody has probably heard that word way more than they have in their entire lives at this point. But things like garage doors are on a 20-week backlog. So we're hoping that by having a large order sent to this centralized warehouse in Michigan, that we can get ahead of some of these supply chain issues by just having the economy of scale to kind of negotiate a better deal and quicker, you know, deliveries. But you know, start to finish, we on our original FDD said 9 months. We think that given the current climate, that's a little unrealistic, and we've moved the number to 14 months for 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Angela, it looks like you're up next. Do you have a question for Costa?
Well, thank you for taking the call and taking the time for this. It's been very illuminating. A lot of great questions. Probably all of them were rolling around in my head. So I appreciate everyone kind of tapping into their intellectual capital and asking the questions. I am going to go very basic. When you're looking at your FDD, you're looking at the potential revenue based off of 1 or 2 bays. You know, is that estimate, the medium estimate, based off of a 2-bay business? You mentioned it was only 4 that you were using as your low end, your high end, and your median. I'm just curious as to...
Yeah, the 4 locations that are in the 2020 FDD or 2021 FDD are all 2-bay facilities. One of them does not have drive-through capabilities, and one of them does not have pits. So even they are kind of a little off from the model. I had been super conservative when it came to what I thought the ceiling was for the 1-bay. I had thought that the ceiling for revenue with the 1-bay was going to end up being somewhere like $500,000 just due to the limitations. And then we had our grand opening of that store in Menor on the Lake, and we did 38 cars on the first day, and we had no disruption in customer service, and we had no, complaints about wait time. And so I've actually changed my opinion on that. I think that the revenue ceiling is a lot higher than $500,000 for the single bay. The staffing needs of the 2 stores are exactly the same. And again, all variables equal, the 2-bay obviously is going to be, a better long-term play. But the single bay will be a lower cost of entry and also open up more opportunities for real estate. So that's kind of, where we're at with it.
Okay, and the just playing on that, I'm up in New Jersey, so I think it's wide open right now for this location. And are you saying that as a potential franchise owner, it would be more advantageous to make sure that we have a location that has drive-through and a pit as well?
Yeah, 100%. And if you were to do the only way that would come into play is if you did a conversion of an existing quick lube. We would not approve anything that doesn't have the pits or drive-through for conversion. If you do our model with our leaseback program and have a new construction, it's always going to have both the pit and the drive-through capability.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Next up is Brett. Good morning. You have a question for Costa? Let's see, Brett's on mute. Brandon, do you have Brett on mute?
Hey, is that better?
Yes, now we can hear you. Good morning.
Costa, really enjoyed this call so far. Super impressed about what you've accomplished. Just fantastic. And also, thank you for jumping on the call to answer these questions. 2 questions. One is, I was trying to type faster than I could listen and type. Did you say the target lease is $3,000 per month?
The target ground lease, if you go with a new construction, we want it to be between $2,000 and $2,500. And then the building expense for a 1-bay is going to be 10% of the build. We've been using $300,000, but that number can be plus minus $100,000 based on the site development expense. But the way that our investor group is that will finance the construction of the building, they're just going to take 10% of what the building cost is and then divide that by 12, and that's your monthly rent.
Fantastic. One more quick question and I'll let you go. You've been through startup of multiple locations. Tell me what pearls you've gained or learned about startup and getting to the end of year 1.
Yeah, so we have a pretty robust grand opening marketing guide that we can share. And the grand opening is important because it can parlay into the rest of that 9 months in terms of the media part of it, the imagery around the grand opening, getting people excited about you being a part of the community. One thing that has been important as I've gone to states and towns that I'm not necessarily personally connected to. So I'm standing in Hanover in our headquarters right now, and I sponsor the local Little League team here, and I sponsor, I just sent some money to the Rotary Club for a child abuse awareness foundation that they're doing. And that is, that is something that is close by. It's my community. It's important. If I did something like that in Pittsburgh, it would seem a little disingenuous So I try to get the managers more involved with maybe the local businesses. So Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, for example, I pay for the manager to have a membership at the gym inside the plaza. So he talks to the owner then advocates for us, and then business cards are exchanged at the front desk. And there's a lot of things that can be done in the beginning of the store to help facilitate the ramp up period. If you were to look at Valvoline's 2013 FDD, they estimate that their corporate ramp up period is 3 years, and their franchise ramp up is 4 years. But you're talking about a total investment of $1 million+ to get into the Valvoline system. So and there's even a line in that FDD that says be prepared to have negative cash flow for a while. We tried to be conservative, but at the same time as streamlined as possible to make sure that we're not wasting any dollars. And that goes from the analytics of the initial inventory order, which we talk about in detail at the Discovery Day, to things like the building itself. So I found out, especially when I was looking in the Chicago market, some of these older quick lubes that from back in the 90s that used to do 100 cars a day when the oil change interval was only 2,000 miles and there was only 2 weights of motor oil, 530 and 1030. Those landlords had been getting large checks for a long time, and there was this period of time where they had to basically come back to reality and say, hey, the industry has evolved, and if you guys aren't going to evolve, no one's going to be able to use your space. And these buildings are not easy to repurpose. So when someone like me comes in, drives a hard line on the lease, but puts the business in a position to succeed, in the long run, the landlord will appreciate that way more than someone going in there at $12,000 a month and being out of business by month 12.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Great. We have one lost candidate individual that's joined us. Brad, thanks for joining us. Do you have a question for Costa? Brad Barker, I see you're on mute right now. Brandon, are you able to take Brad off mute?
No, all you can do is ask someone to come off mute.
Okay.
Yes, Costa, thanks for the invite. Very informative. Appreciate your time. I don't have any additional questions right now. They've been answered by the previous questions. Thanks.
Great. Costa, I know we're coming up to the 45-minute mark. I don't know if you have any additional time here. If anyone else has a question.
I'm waiting on someone to walk through the door any minute now, but I right now still have a little bit of time.
Great. Well, let's open it up if anyone else has a question.
All right. I think that was a really good call, Michael. If anyone does have any additional questions, Michael can get out to everybody that's his participant the National Oil and Lube Magazine Industry Study PDF that kind of shares some of those numbers in terms of ticket average and average cars per day and what percentage of what weight of oil is used these days and things like that. If you're one of Chris's candidates, he has access to that document as well. Feel free, if you have any questions, my email can be dispersed by Michael or Chris as well. I'll try to be as responsive as I can.
Super. Well, thanks, Costa. And then hopefully we'll get a chance to meet all of you at a Discovery Day. The one in February is coming up next week, the 16th, 17th, and then in March as well. It's the Wednesday, Thursday, March 16th and the 17th. So that's a day and a half. We fly into Baltimore, Washington International, and then drive out to York, Pennsylvania, Hanover, where our corporate office is, spend the night there. We have dinner together. And then the following day, we have workshops and we tour one of our corporate oil facilities, auto lube facilities that's very close by. And then we head back to the airport around 1:45 on the Thursday afternoon. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Michael. See you next week.
Yep. Thanks, Costa. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.